Welcome to Boulevard's Big Three, where we get to talk about this week's sermon with questions from you, me, Emily, and our special guest, the phenomenal Britt Rosser, who's also my husband. Okay, we're in week 8 of the Upside Down movement, and every week we're presented with a new way to think, things that are really challenging our worldview.
Yeah, and it's been a really great series so
really
far.
has.
Brent, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good to be back.
Yes, we're glad you're here. Okay, so we call this the Big Three. There's 3 of us, so we're all going to start with a question and observation, the highlight from this morning's sermon, and we're just going to discuss it like we would if we went out to eat for lunch after church and just talking about the sermon. So Emily, you start. What was something that really jumped out at you from the sermon?
Yeah, so something that stuck out to me was when Hunzi went through, talked about how Satan attacked the church in Acts 4, 5, and 6, and how he did it in different ways. And it just is a good reminder that the spiritual warfare that we always talk about is very real. And Satan will use very, almost like daily things that, you won't think of that, oh, that's actually Satan working in that person. And I think that actually could kind of help you love that person even more because it's not them.
Yeah.
They, when it's talking about the government that was persecuting the church, or Ananias and Sapphira who lied about how much money they were giving, that is Satan working through them.
Right.
So I feel like that, remembering that, can help you be a lot more patient, a lot more loving to those people who may treat you that way.
Yeah, and then we have to balance that with also knowing what Hunzi talked about, how God is always at work. Because I think sometimes we think a lot of times, or I'll think a lot of times about what Satan is doing behind the scenes, and it makes me fearful. But I always have to remember that God is a infinite times more powerful than Satan.
Well,
Absolutely.
And God has already defeated Satan. I mean, Jesus dying on the cross and resurrecting he defeated him already. So if we keep that in mind, that then gives us the power to overcome whatever Satan is trying to do through other people or through us. So.
Right. We don't have to be afraid. Yeah. What about you, Brent? What really stuck out at you?
So Hunzi put up a quote, and I didn't write down who said this quote, but it said that Stephen had become to others what Jesus had been to him. I thought that was a really cool way to look at that, and just thinking about what has Jesus done for us. He unconditionally loves us. He sacrificed himself for us. Even though he was God, he is a servant for us. And so we talk about being like Jesus. And so what does that mean? That means unconditionally loving people. It means being a servant for people and things like that. And I also liked what he said, to ask God, what are you doing and how can I join you? And so it's being mindful of how God is working through our lives and being willing to say, I want to join in on that. I want to allow you to work through me to be part of whatever you're doing in this world, God.
And he made sure to let us know Stephen wasn't a superhero. He was an ordinary man. He said that several times, who was filled with the Spirit. And so that's what enabled him to do those things, Yeah. And what about the part when he's about to be stoned and he looks up at heaven and sees Jesus? I mean, that's powerful.
I can't imagine. Yeah, that's and to have the mindset of to say, please forgive them for what they're doing. I mean, that is, I can't fathom that.
No. I think a lot of times we ask, I'm doing this, I feel like I'm being a good person, why are these bad things happening to me? And then you have someone like Stephen, who is the ultimate example of doing what he was supposed to be doing, following the Holy Spirit. And he was stoned to death in this really painful death. And, so we can't expect that everything's going to go perfectly for us if it doesn't go perfectly for them.
Yeah, but then we're lucky to have the Bible to see how God used his death to then, won't give any spoilers for next week, but how he uses his death to propel the Christian movement farther than it could ever have gone.
Yeah, with the most unlikely person you could have picked.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I wrote down a bunch of different things, but the one thing that I'm really going to try and really think about and work on was, he was giving us this list of different things of how to participate in the activity of the Spirit and the activity of what God's doing. He said, refuse to limit the work of God. Ask God, like what you said, what are you doing? Can I join you? And the thing that I put all kinds of arrows on when I was making my notes was slow down. Because I'm a pretty scheduled person. I've got a couple of different calendars I work from. I stay pretty busy. And I want to be able to slow down and make sure that I am stopping and listening for those promptings of the Holy Spirit. I don't want to ignore them.
It's hard. It's really hard because we're
hard.
very self-centered people, and we have lots of things we need to do, and we have children and things to take care of and jobs and things. But yeah, absolutely. Just those times where we can slow down and try to listen to the Holy Spirit or be in the Word, talk to God is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was awesome, guys. Thanks for sitting around and talking with us about it. And guys, if you're listening right now, and if you have more questions, it's not too late to go and ask us your questions. Let us know by using the QR code on the screen.
Yeah, and if you want to rewatch the sermon or watch it for the first time, you can find it at boulevard.to/sermons. And that is a wrap on this week's Big Three. Brent, thanks so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, glad you're here. Okay, guys, look for this podcast on your favorite platforms, and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big Three.